Monitoring margins with daily reporting. This is a cool section because this is a system that we created. It involves Slack, Google Sheets, and turn that into an invoice. It gives the client transparency, but it also helps you have healthy margins and keep track of those things. It also is the heartbeat of your business. So you are able to see what all of your employees are doing. And this is when you have employees, right? I think this is something that you implement even before employees, just to start that process. And then as you add clients, you add employees, you start implementing them into this process, which is really cool. It allows you to see how much each person is working each day. So let's say you have an employee on salary. You want to make sure that person is working 8 hours a day, at least 7 if they take an hour lunch break. And you're able to see what they do each month. It's very easy as a business owner when you start to remove yourself from projects to start to lose control of what's happening. And you can easily be taken advantage of as a business owner and start paying people more than the work that they're doing. And the problem with that is that your company is going to be making so much from a certain client. And if you're paying your employees more than you're making, that's a recipe for a disaster. And so we want to avoid that. So going into daily reporting each day and actually taking those numbers and putting them into a sheet and then adjusting those numbers as needed based on the budget of your client is so important for you to do as a business owner. And you'll get to a point where maybe you hire someone to do this for you, but it's super important for you to know what your business needs to thrive and survive. And there's going to be times where someone may spend 4 hours on a project and you're not able to charge that. So you're going to go in and not actually take 4 hours. You're going to make it 3 hours when you actually put it into the invoice so that the client saves money. And then there's times where someone might have done something really fast and you're like, hey, that took you 2 hours. I'm going to have 3 hours because there probably was a lot of time researching, developing, and exporting things that you don't necessarily charge for, which you're going to add to it. So anyway, big explanation into why daily reporting is so good and why I'm such a fan of it. It's a little bit tedious for your team and it's a little bit tedious for you as an owner, but it's important to be tedious and get into the numbers of how your business is moving and operating so that you're healthy. So let's understand the why. I think I've gone into a lot of this just in the introduction, but the point is we want to stay within the budget that was agreed to, identify inefficiencies early, optimize workflows to maintain profitability. And even as a solopreneur, this is good for you to see, to report and keep track of your hours. If you have a fixed retainer for somebody and you're doing fixed deliverables, still keep track of your time, how much that time took, and then you can see what that is coming to as an hourly rate. You can work backwards and be like, oh my gosh, I'm only charging 50 an hour when I should be charging 75 an hour. But then also it helps you go, how do I get faster? How do I make my margins better by getting faster and getting these videos done quicker? And that's also a part of learning with a business, is getting to a point where you know how to edit their videos faster, where you're still making the same amount, but you're spending less time. We want to get to that point. So spending more time in the beginning is okay as you're learning how to get faster with each client. So we're enhancing client trust. We've talked about that 100,000 times. Now I'm going to show you how we do the daily reporting. And we've set up a channel in Slack. And what that looks like, if I open up Slack, is it's just a channel right here that my team's in. And each day that they do work, they're keeping track of each project. They're adding the time, whether it's finished or not. And then I come in and I actually take that information, I put it into a sheet, and then I take that sheet and I put it into an invoice. I've been trying to figure out a better way to actually approach this, but every time I go down a different route, it's not effective. And so there are automation tools, but you really need to be able to customize what your team's doing for the output, because you could start throwing these numbers into an invoice and send it to a client and they see it and they're like, whoa, you spent way more time than we expected. And I'm like, oh, I didn't realize because I didn't see it. Where if that's also a way that you can go back and communicate with your team and be like, hey, I noticed you spent this much time on a project. We need to only spend this much time. I'm only going to charge the client this much time, but it's worth the investment in you to make you faster and get to that 2 hours where maybe it took you 4. You wouldn't know that otherwise. So that's why this is important and why I call it the heartbeat of your business. Is if you don't have this, you're just throwing things out. And that's the whole point of this, is to communicate and be transparent. and make sure you can see what's happening, and then the client can see what's happening. And keep in mind, this will get to a point where that doesn't matter and your client's just happy with what you're doing and the relationship's developed. You've been working with them for 2+ years and you're just cranking and things are going and there's no confusion. They just see their retainer, they pay it. And then by then you're like super dialed in on the numbers. You have the employee that's managing the client, and the numbers start to just make sense, and you're making that same amount every month, and you're hopefully just growing with them. So anyway, I kind of go through what I do. So I call it daily reporting. We set expectations for our team early. So if you bring this to them later, it's kind of a tedious annoyance. But then if you just establish this is what we do at this company, it's not a problem. That's what I've learned. So they're going to report their hours worked, tasks completed, any challenges they face. So if they came up with something that was like, hey, there's a reason why it took me this long, and they explain that, that's also something to have. So we want to standardize the reporting, right? So that everything looks the same, so I can look at a glance quickly at what it is. So date, client name, task name, status of task, time spent. So for example, this is what that looks like. So now I'm going to show you the next section, which is taking it from Slack to Google Sheets. And inside there, we have, I'll show you an example of what that looks like. So here's an example of what that actually looks like, a sheet that we use. So I'll go in and add the task here, and then the hours worked on the day, and then that all adds up and then kicks out a number here at the bottom for me. There's things like production 2, meaning you probably have 2 people. Production 3, maybe you have 3 people that are filmmakers working on this project. And you'll determine with the client what those things look like. And I have different ways to go about this with every client. So that's part of this customization process. So Bullfit, for example, they do editing. We have meeting hours, but then we also have design work. So this sheet looks different than the one that I had just shown you here for Honeylove. And every sheet is a little different for each client. And even the price is different for each client. Another example is Laced Hair is one of our clients. And pull this up here. So they have editing, and then there's even a Tyson only. Like I charge a little bit more, so I have a section for that. And then they have this section here where we charge an entirely different rate for this type of project. These are very basic projects, so they wanted to be charged less, which made sense because it didn't take as much creativity or work to fulfill those, where this is where the price comes in for, more creative things that they're asking for like social media and stuff like that. And before I get into all this, I'm just going to plug coaching again. A lot of this can be extremely confusing, and I want to be able to show you and actually implement these things into your business if you're interested in that. So hiring me as a coach where I can actually hold your hand and do this with you so that it's clear, because this is very confusing. It's been developed over years and years and years, and I'm still perfecting it. I'm still changing. I'm still growing, especially with AI coming out. I want to be able to get better at all this. But this is what it looks like. And then why use Google Sheets? Everyone on your team can access and see updates in real time. I also will take these and I'll share them with my clients. I won't share the actual sheet with them, but I will screenshot that and I'll add it to the invoice so they can actually see what was worked on, when it was worked on, how many hours it took, and how we came to that price. Step 3 in daily reporting and the importance of it is being able to review and analyze data and adjust, right? I've talked about this at the beginning. So being able to check the budget. So an hour, if a retainer allows for 40 hours a month and 25 hours are used in the first 2 weeks, you're on track. So you're looking at each week and you're saying, okay, we've done 10 hours, we've done 20 hours, maybe we've done, and you're keeping track and you'll be able to analyze and review and make sure that your company and business is healthy. So you're going to start to spot trends. So that some things might take longer. This is when you bring up those concerns with your team members and ask them why. You're not going to charge the client that much. And that's the other important thing is, like I said, if you just let this automatically go into an invoice, there's no understanding. And a client might see that and be like, that took you 4 hours. I could go hire someone and it'd probably take 2. And I'm like, you're right. It would only take me 2 hours, but it took my teammate, my employee, 4 hours. So you want to get ahead of that. See that and be like, okay, well, I know I would only take 2 hours, so I'm going to charge for 2 hours. And then I'm going to talk to my employee and understand why it took 4 hours and then make those adjustments as we go. And then we have monthly client reporting. So we're going to actually share our invoice with the client to be paid. And then we're going to help them see and understand how we got to that price or that number, or how we're staying within budget, or how it looks with their fixed monthly retainer. That's the difference though, between the fixed monthly retainer and the monthly budget, those 2 options I talked about at the beginning, these are different, where if you have a fixed monthly retainer, it's going to be the exact price and you're just going to invoice them for that price, and you're going to call it monthly retainer budget for editing, filmmaking, whatever it ends up being. But on your end of things, you're diving into the data and you're able to see how you got and how you're going to stay within that price because you're not doing the work anymore. You're now having employees do it. You want to make sure that you're not going over budget on your end. They don't need to see that. Then there's the monthly budget retainer, which is you have that $10,000 and you're staying within it. So then you're showing them exactly what was in that, how you got to the 10K, because they want to see what they paid for. And they might go in and be like, why am I getting charged this much for that? And then but you want to be ahead of that. And then, but at the same time, those questions will arise. And when they do arise, you're able to communicate with them and help them understand why. And then they get it. And then by months and months and months, if not years into the relationship, there's no questions. They actually understand why things take as long as they do. And then at the end of this, you just want to be able to make adjustments based on the insights and things that you're learning. So you're going to address inefficiencies with your team and adjust the scope. So for example, based on the past 3 months, we've noticed your projects regularly take 15 to 20 more hours than the current retainer covers. Let's discuss adjusting the retainer, the agreement to better align with your needs. And that's just communicating, that's being transparent, helping them understand why you need more money. And if you can show them the data that you've gathered from your team, then they're going to be like, okay, that makes sense. Or they're just going to say, hey, we actually just need to dial it back to stay within the budget. So dial back your work and be like, cool, that's great. So super complicated, but at the same time, it is the heartbeat of your business and it's super important. So that's the end of module 4. Let's dive into module 5 next, transparency and avoiding surprises.